But the reality is, quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts, they dictate what the defense can and cannot do.
It's the Ross Tucker Football Podcast.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Wisdom Wednesday, presented, of course, by DraftKings. And every once in a while, I like to throw you guys off a little bit. We got Greg Cosell on a Wednesday. There's many reasons for that, primarily because we still need to get to linebackers and defensive backs with Greg before the draft. And I want to make sure you have plenty of time to listen or watch, maybe even twice. Some people say they listen to the Greg Cosell segments twice. So I want to make sure you have plenty of time. So we got Greg today talking linebackers. And then on Monday, we'll bring Greg back and we'll get into DBs. So you have plenty of time to hear Greg's breakdowns before next Thursday's draft, which is only 8 days away, which is just wild to say out loud. We will have new Spread the Word. I think we'll do the last show on Friday probably this week, and we'll have some new winners. Looking forward to it. We'll have a new Spread the Word winner via social media. Could be someone that does a Facebook review of Ross Tucker Pod account, or could be someone that rates and reviews the show on like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. All you have to do is rate and review the show. It takes like less than a minute. Screenshot it on your phone and then send that bad boy to Ross at rosstucker.com. We always have the sponsor confirmation email winner. Take advantage of one of our awesome sponsors that you hear on the show or you see on the sponsor tab at rosstucker.com. And then the YouTube shout out. Rob Zagaro is going to be our winner this week. How about that for throwing you guys off the scent? I'm giving you an early winner for the YouTube shout out, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Just subscribed, replied to one of the videos. Maybe I'll have another one on Friday. You never know. Special guest on Friday, by the way, Andre Yosivash, the Princeton wide receiver that's going to get drafted on day 2 or day 3. He will join us to talk about what the process has been like for him so far up until this point. But right now, it's Greg Cosell time. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
All right, Greg, there's a lot to discuss as it relates to the NFL. We'll get to the linebackers for this draft momentarily. But before we do, I got to ask you the big news as it relates to Jalen Hurts. I mean, we talked a lot last year about Jalen Hurts. Is there any concern you still have with him, Greg? Is there any hesitation? I know some people have said, well, listen, he only showed that he's done it for 1 year. He hasn't really done it more than 1 year. Obviously, the Eagles are pretty confident.
You know, that's that whole issue of doing it over a longer period of time. But the reality is that this is the way the league works now, you know, and you're not going to let him walk. So you don't want to get into a debate with him and his agent. So you sign him. This is an offense ultimately that is built around Jalen Hurts. See, one thing that's never talked about, Ross, is what quarterbacks that are major factors in your run game do to the defense. You know, it might be easy to say, well, he's not as good a thrower as Joe Burrow, or he's not as good a thrower as this guy. But the reality is quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts, they dictate what the defense can and cannot do. And that makes your passing game much better in terms of what you can do with the pass. So the Eagles are not a team that runs 100 concepts in the pass game. They don't have to, because they know what the defense has to do to account for Jalen Hurts as a runner. So it makes the passing game so much more efficient and, relatively speaking, easier. And then when you add really good players who can win one-on-one matchups, then you have a really good passing game. But it all starts with Hurts and what he gives you in the run game and how that dictates what teams have to do in terms of personnel and alignment.
It's really funny that you say that, Greg, because I've been asked a lot this week about Hurts and Burrow and Lamar Jackson. I even put on Twitter with all these guys looking for new contracts. who would you rather have? How would you rank those guys? And Burrow's phenomenal, but man, it's tough for a defense when the quarterback can run. I mean, it's just tough.
Well, and not only when he can run, Ross, but when you build your offense to deal with that. In the old days, when I say old days, 5, 6, 10 years ago, a quarterback that could run, people thought about that in terms of scrambling on third down. Now we're dealing with offenses where they're built around the quarterback and his ability to run, because he's in the shotgun all the time and all the run game elements that come off that. So what that means for the defense and how they have to play, that's the critical piece. I mean, does he throw the ball as well as Joe Burrow? No. Is he as, are there other quarterbacks you might say are better overall in terms of skill set? Sure. But, Hurts brings an awful lot, and he makes it difficult for defenses to play.
Let's get to Allen Robinson quickly, because he got traded last night, Greg. It's interesting. Loved him in Jacksonville. Had some big seasons in Chicago. Justin Fields' rookie year, he didn't do much, but you thought, okay, well, they had no O-line. They had a rookie quarterback. The Rams obviously really liked him. They gave him huge money last year. Did not work out. The Steelers got him for essentially nothing. I'm curious what he was when he was at his best, because he's not that old of a guy, Greg, and he was never really a burner. So I feel like he shouldn't be the type of guy that, loses a step and it totally ruins his game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't see a ton of him last year because of the Rams offense losing Stafford. But you're right. I mean, his game was never built on vertical speed. Although I remember that one year in Jacksonville, it might have been Bortles as the quarterback, if memory serves me correctly, where he put up big numbers and had a high yards per catch and had vertical plays. But he's obviously not that guy. I think that you're hoping, Pittsburgh is for sure, you're hoping that in the context of their offense now, that he can line up both inside and outside, give you that flexibility, probably be more of a short to intermediate receiver and be consistent. They don't need him to be 80 for 1,200. That, I don't think they see him that way, but he's a veteran receiver. In some ways, think of what Juju Smith-Schuster did for the Chiefs, probably that kind of player within the context of your offense.
Well, and okay, first of all, he's 29 years old. Second of all, Greg, he's going to be their fourth option, maybe fifth. I mean, they're going to have Pickens. They're going to have Deontay Johnson. They got Freiermuth. They like throwing the ball to Najee Harris. He seems like a pretty good, afterthought, or guys that the defense isn't that concerned about.
And that might be true. And as you said, they didn't pay a lot for him. So we'll see. Maybe if he can return to something of his form, then they've got a steal. But, that's what they're hoping.
I'm hoping this weekend to have a bunch of Labatt Blue Lights, Greg, with friends, probably starting tomorrow night and then Friday night, and living life to the power of we, especially during playoff hockey. Why not? Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Greg, let's get to the linebackers. And I know we have a similar conversation every year, but let's just talk about the Eagles and the Bears, okay? The Bears in free agency, the first day, pay pretty good money for TJ Edwards. Then they pay really big money for Tremaine Edmonds. The Eagles sign a linebacker for the minimum. The Eagles let both their linebackers go. The Buffalo Bills let Tremaine Edmonds go. What do you think about the Bears versus the Eagles linebacker philosophy? Is one of them right? Is one of them wrong? Or is it more about their specific defense?
I think it's probably more along the lines of your second point. I think that there's different philosophies on what's important, what are important positions within the context of your defense. This year, the Eagles, for instance, played a ton of five-man fronts. Now, I know they've never thought, or Howie Roseman, for the most part, has never thought that stacked backers are that important a position relative to other positions. I would say that that's a general feeling in the league, but it's not 100%. Different teams see it differently. The issue is if you're going, and obviously the Bears feel that they're really good now at stacked backer, but if you're not good at stacked backer, or you don't have great players and you feel you don't need them, then it becomes incumbent upon the rest of your defense. What do you have with the rest of your defense? I remember speaking to a really well-regarded defensive coordinator a number of years ago who said that, hey, it's always easy to say a position is not important, but if you don't have good players at that particular position, it limits what you can do defensively. So it all depends on the structure of your defense and how you want to play. The Eagles, for instance, have a really good D-line. They play a lot of five-man fronts. They don't think that a stacked backer in the context of their defense is that important a player. So, and obviously they had a good defense a year ago. We'll see what happens this year. They lost a lot of players.
Drew Sanders, Trenton Simpson, Deion Henley, Jack Campbell. These are some of the top-ranked, top-name guys. Was there a guy that you really liked? I always usually like to ask you that one first as it relates to these draft prospects.
Yeah, I really like Jack Campbell on tape, and he is your quintessential stack backer. So, again, now it comes down to philosophy, just as we were discussing. He's really big. 6'5" is a trait. He actually tested really, really well. He is a stack backer. He's got great size. As I said, that's a trait. He plays a physical game. He can stack and shed. He's really good with what we call key and diagnose, read and react. And he does that with an ideal mix of patience, vision, and decisiveness. There are times he would wait and see how it all played out. There are other times he would attack downhill. He played with his hands really well. He navigated the box really well. He played in underneath zone coverage exceptionally well. The concern with him might be, can he match up to tight ends, man to man? Even though he's big, that would be a question. But he's a really, really good prospect who knows how to play stack backer, and he's really good at it. And it's my understanding he's been working with Luke Kuechly, and that's not a bad guy to work with.
It's amazing that there's a linebacker that's 6'5", 250. I remember a few years ago at the draft, I guess it's 5 years ago now, seeing Leighton Vander Esch and Tremaine Edmonds. And, Greg, I couldn't believe it. They were taller than me. I mean, they were tall. They were big dudes. They looked like tight ends. They looked like D ends, and they were off-the-ball backers. That's Jack Campbell. Now, I do a college game every week. Greg, most of these linebackers now in college football are like 6'1", 220. Maybe 6 foot, 215. A big one's like 6'2", 230. So it feels like 6'5", 250 is like an outlier now at linebacker.
Well, and that's why Trenton Simpson, who you mentioned, is a very intriguing prospect. No, he's 6'2", 235, but you're dealing with an athlete. I mean, this guy ran a 4.43. I mean, this guy has ridiculous athletic testing numbers. He played multiple spots for Clemson, but I think he's going to start as a stacked backer. That's what he ultimately is in the NFL. So you're dealing now with a guy that has high-level athletic traits. That's ultimately where I think people see the league going and what they want in their linebackers. So he's got that desirable size, speed, athleticism profile that could result in a first-round selection. We'll see how it plays out on draft night. But he's got the kind of traits that people look at in today's NFL with the more three wide receiver offenses. And I don't want to say spread like it's college football, but the idea that you have to defend the pass before you have to defend the run in the minds of many. So someone like Simpson certainly fits that.
Seems like he didn't get as much, coming into the year, there were people really excited about him. It didn't seem like it carried through the year. I don't know if he had some bad games or if it was a key and diagnose thing, but there were people that were really high on him coming into the year that don't seem as high now. I'm not sure what happened there.
Yeah, and I think that he's a space player more than a physicality player. He's a movement player. I think he can at times play physically. They all can. There are plays where you have to, but I'm talking about it generally speaking. The guy he kind of reminded me of when I watched his tape was Willie Gay. And Willie Gay was a second-round pick by the Chiefs in 2020. He and Simpson's athletic testing measurables very, very similar. And obviously Gay was a starter for the Chiefs and played in their sub as well.
Let's talk about Drew Sanders, the Arkansas linebacker. He transferred from Alabama and had an unbelievable year for Arkansas. I mean, 9.5 sacks, 103 tackles, 13.5 tackles for loss.
Yeah, now Sanders left Alabama because he went there as an edge rusher. And they obviously had Will Anderson and Dallas Turner, who'll probably be a top 10 pick next year. So he really made the transition to being a stacked backer because the majority of his snaps came as a stacked backer. Now, he can rush the quarterback because that's what he did most of his life until this year. So that's where the 9.5 sacks came from. But he's essentially a stacked backer. And I thought he played pretty well. You know, he's big. Another guy that's over 6'4". He's 235. I thought, given the fact that he had not played that position really before, that he had a pretty good feel for what he was seeing. Pretty good key and diagnose. I thought he had some short area explosiveness. He slipped blocks. He played downhill with aggression. He took on blocks. I thought that for the most part, he played well. He's got athletic and physical traits. He's competitive. He's tough. He could develop into an impact playmaker type guy because he does bring that pass rush element as well.
The last guy I wanted to ask you about, Greg, at linebackers, Deion Henley, because from Washington State, this is a big favorite of Emory Hunt's on the College Draft Podcast, which we record every Monday. He's been talking about Deion Henley all year. He loves Deion Henley. I don't know much about him other than just Emory talks about him all the time. Did you get a chance to check out the linebacker from Washington State?
He's a fascinating guy because he was a receiver in high school, and he started his college career at Nevada as a receiver. He's only played stacked backer for 2 years. But I got to tell you, this guy is fun to watch. He is a compact, sudden, supercharged, highly competitive athlete. He's got great play speed and range. His activity and energy level is just, he's fun. He plays with a really quick trigger. One thing when you see guys who haven't played the position, stacked linebacker, you really try to get a feel for how they see things because, it's just different. The guy was a receiver. And I did not think that he had significant issues with play recognition. I thought he saw things and he triggered. He was a scrape and flow guy. He was a run and hit guy. I really enjoyed watching this guy play. He's going to be an ascending player because he's still relatively new to the position, but he fits what you said, Ross, because he's 6'1", 225.
Right, that's what the games I do, that's what the college linebackers look like, and they can run and they can hit and they can cover. That's what their size is for the most part. Check Greg out on social media, please, at Greg Cosell. He'll be back on Monday again to break down the defensive backs in the draft, and then it'll be time for the draft. And as I mentioned, we'll have Andre Yosivas from Princeton, the stud receiver, a little bit later in the week. Thanks so much, Greg.
Thanks, Ross.
Love me some Greg Cosell, just like I love me some myfrontpagestory.com. Please, guys, it's less than a month away till Mother's Day. I'm just telling you, it's by far the best gift you could ever get your mom, your wife, your grandmother. Trust me, a story written all about them, they're going to cry tears of joy. Plus, it's framed. It looks like it's on the cover of the newspaper. They'll have it hanging up in your house forever. myfrontpagestory.com.
Tux Takes.
All right, Ross, we'll start with what we mentioned earlier. Jalen Hurts getting a 5-year, $255 million contract, including $179 million guaranteed and a no-trade clause.
So this happened like shortly after we finished recording a Monday show, like, 30 minutes, an hour after we were done. So I ended up doing a social media video, which is why I would really encourage you guys. I know you're not on every social media platform, but whatever one you're on, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or even TikTok, follow at Ross Tucker NFL or at Ross Tucker Pod. so that you get those clips and you can get my quick reaction. Here's what I think. I am thrilled for Jalen Hurts because, a guy got benched in the national championship game, was a backup for a year in college, had to transfer, wasn't thought of as a great prospect like Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield, goes to a team that nobody thought should draft him, has to eventually start to play. He's called a running quarterback, and now he's almost MVP of the Super Bowl and gets the biggest contract in NFL history. It is incredible. From an Eagles perspective, I thought Greg nailed it. You're going to sign him. You might as well be first, because I do believe Herbert and Burrow will get more now, and maybe even Lamar Jackson. So if you're the Eagles, why wait? Very, very smart of them to do what they did.
Tuck's Takes.
Steelers trade down 14 spots in the 7th round in order to get Allen Robinson from the Rams, and they will only pay $5 million of his $15 million guaranteed.
This is incredible. I mean, the Rams are paying him $10 million to go away, and they only moved up 14 spots. I mean, the Rams clearly can't stand Allen Robinson. I mean, for $5 more million, you could have just had him on your team this year. I mean, they're paying him $10 million essentially to go away, and that trade is essentially a flop for almost nothing. I mean, 14 spots in the 7th round is like just doing a trade just to say you traded him. They must really think he fell off a cliff. Greg and I talked about that a little bit earlier. We'll see whether or not he did, but yikes.
Tuck's Takes.
Quinnen Williams is not participating in the New York Jets offseason program, wanting a new contract.
Well, look, there's a lot of guys that aren't under contract because they're franchise tagged that aren't participating in the offseason program. It's a little bit different when you're under contract like Quinnen Williams, but it's also not mandatory yet. And so we'll see whether or not he skips something that's mandatory. Then that'll be a little bit more noteworthy because then the team can fine him. But yeah, he had a great year. He wants his money. That's the way it works.
Tuck's Takes.
A flurry of signings across the league. The Bucs signed veteran offensive lineman Matt Filer. The Bills re-signed A.J. Klein. The Cardinals signed quarterback Jeff Driscoll. Niners signed wide receiver Chris Conley. And the Chargers signed wide receiver Jalen Guyton.
So there's two philosophies really, Jack, this time of year, right? There is wait until after the draft and see where there's a good landing spot based on teams that still have needs because they didn't draft somebody at your spot. Then there's also the other philosophy, which is I better get a spot before it's too late. I better get signed, go somewhere so that the team hopefully doesn't draft the guy and thinks we don't need to draft him. We got this guy. Most of these guys do not preclude the team from drafting a player. But I understand why they want to kind of make sure they have a spot before the draft.
Tuck's Takes.
Bills defensive back Damar Hamlin is cleared for full football activity.
Wow. I mean, that is wonderful, obviously. There's two different parts to this. There's part one, that he met with all these doctors and he's cleared for full football activity. That is just phenomenal. I mean, we almost lost an NFL player on the field. The flip side is, whether or not he should or you would play again. By all accounts, it feels like what happened to him, it was like he was struck by lightning. Like that's how rare it is to get hit in the exact wrong place at the exact wrong time. At any rate, one way or the other, I am so happy for Damar that he's made it through to the other side. Shout outs to Pizza Boy Brewing, Sporticulture, HumanHeadNYC.com, SteakhouseSports.com, Go-Bengals.com, Evergreen Economics, and BackOfficeSchedule.com, or MyFrontPageStory.com. I think we're done here.
Thanks for listening to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also subscribe to the Fantasy Feast, Even Money, Business of Sports, and College Draft. All available at Apple Podcasts, RossTucker.com, or wherever podcasts can be found.